As the UK tries to reset its relations with China, could the emergence of an alleged Chinese spy who gained a, quote, unusual level of trust with the King of England's brother undercut those efforts? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm EP553. Joining us today are Lai I-chung, Prospect Foundation President, and Vincent Chao, Taipei City Councilor. Very warm welcome to both of you on the show today. Earlier in December, a British special court ruled to uphold a 2023 Home Office decision barring a Chinese man, previously identified as H6, from entering the UK on national security grounds. Yang Tenbo is alleged to have worked covertly to further the interests of the Chinese Communist Party by British intelligence service MI5. Yang lost his appeal to the UK's Special Immigrations Appeal Commission, which found that Yang's role as a business advisor to Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, had facilitated his work for the CCP. Prince Andrew says he has severed all ties with Yang. Here's what the UK Minister of State for Security, Jan Jarvis, had to say.
We welcome the court's decision to uphold the Home Office's position in regard to the exclusion of H6, who can now be named as Yang Tenbo. The Special Immigration Appeals Commission concluded that there was a basis for the conclusion that H6 had been in a position to generate relationships with prominent UK figures which could be leveraged for political interference purposes by the Chinese Communist Party, including the United Front Work Department and the Chinese state.
President Lai, so this is the first Chinese espionage case linked to the royal family, the British royal family, but it isn't the first time that Prince Andrew's judgment has been called into question. What does China gain by placing an operative near to Prince Andrew, given that he has no formal authority, he's removed from the core of power?
Yeah, according to the information that's revealed, they allege that Mr. Yang is working for the United Front Department, which basically means that Yang is not the typical spies or espionage for the security reasons. But he basically is in the process of the political interference operations on behalf of the Chinese state or the CCP itself. And by working with the Prince Andrews, though not directly involving the state security information, but what he wanted to gain is actually through the Andrew to get political access to various other branches or the network into the UK high authority, whether from the royal family to other the royal family related or from royal family directly to the government. I think this is more of an issue about how the United Front Department, the work for the political interference operation or even subversion operations that right now directly goes to the royal family of the United Kingdom.
Right. And Vincent, one of the judges noted that Yang sort of earned this extraordinary or this unusual level of trust from the prince during a period of significant personal pressure for the prince when the mobile phone of Yang was seized. They found on it a document titled Talking Points for the Duke from August 2021, suggesting that Prince Andrew was in a desperate situation and will grab onto anything. Give us a little bit more of the background of how he managed to sort of infiltrate into Prince Andrew's inner circle and himself, and also into the British establishment.
So absolutely. So saying that Prince Andrew is in a bit of a desperate situation may be an understatement of the century, given all the scandals, including sex scandals, that Prince Andrew is involved in. And certainly he's been ostracized by the royal family, and he has various scandals, I think, that have disallowed him from participating publicly as a member of the royal family. But however, he does retain a royal title. I mean, he's still the Duke of York. He's still influential in UK politics and business. And so I think he can be seen as quite an obvious conduit, actually, for a Chinese interest at play. The identification of a person that is currently in a bit of a desperate situation, but nevertheless retains that sort of royal influence.
Okay. President Lai, before we go on to more about Yang's story, I did want us to just touch off on the his infiltration or his embedding into, we've talked about politics, obviously there's business as well, but there's also education because, the Scottish boarding school that both Prince Andrew and King Charles went to, Gordonston, they were forced to terminate an agreement with Yang's company, Hampton Group. And they have actually opened sister campuses in China.
Yeah, I think that the boarding school itself is not just, probably this actually goes both ways. First of all, boarding school in United Kingdom, many of them, they are very prestigious. They provide the very elite education for the establishment, their offspring, their children's. So by having an agreement and immerse yourself into the systems, not only you are able to, through the system, you're able to work with the parents in that school, and many of them, they came from very prominent family and hold tremendous power. But now they open also the boarding school back in China. To a certain extent, I think that also means that they are the Chinese establishment. They want to be part of the boarding schools. And in a boarding school, not only you already retain a certain United Kingdom register and recognized the name recognitions, even back you're in high school, you don't have to go to the college in order to attain that. But also you were able to get the early networking when your kids are in the younger stages. So I think that this is not just about the interference by the Yang himself, but also a systematic relationship building between the UK and also the Chinese, the elites in their children.
Right, okay. Now, China-born Yang Tenbo, also known as Chris Yang, worked for several years as a Chinese civil servant. He moved to London in 2002 to study at York University. In 2005, he founded a consulting firm, Hampton Group, focusing on, quote, investing in, consulting on and enabling opportunities between China, the UK and the rest of the world. In May 2013, he was granted indefinite leave to remain in the UK. This was Yang's response to the Commission's ruling. The widespread description of me as a spy is entirely untrue. The political climate has changed. Unfortunately, I have fallen victim to this. When relations are good and Chinese investment is sought, I am welcome in the UK. When relations sour, an anti-China stance is taken and I am excluded. This is China's foreign ministry on Yang's case.
我昨天也已经阐明了我们的立场，所谓中国间谍的指控，十分的荒唐。我想在这里指出，中英关系的发展既符合两国的共同利益，也有利于促进世界经济增长，应对全球性挑战。希望英方同中方相向而行，多积累积极因素，彰显两国合作、互利共赢的本质。
So, Vincent, we don't have a lot of information about this case, but what's your reaction to Yang's statement in defense and the Chinese Foreign Ministry, which I note did not say they were unaware of this person, Chris Yang?
Well, it's obviously interesting how the Chinese Foreign Ministry has chosen specifically to comment on this case, but I hearken back to what President Lai, President Lai, we have another President Lai in Taiwan as well, to what he said, which is that I do think that if you look at the statements of both Yang as well as the Foreign Ministry, as well as the information that has been gathered and made public through the British media, I think you come away with this conclusion that if Yang is an agent of the Chinese government does take quite a holistic view of what constitutes as influence or intelligence work. And I think traditionally what we've seen in terms of intelligence are cloak and dagger. James Bond, MI6. You sneak into government ministries to steal classified information and so forth. Whereas I think what the Chinese more routinely do, including here in Taiwan, are what we call and see as influence building. And I think that's slightly different from direct intelligence work in a sense that they're not there with specific objectives to steal classified information, to make or be friends with specific people in order to gather information or so forth. I do think that democratic governments around the world are waking up to these sort of influence schemes. So I talked about first, the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. That's sort of modeled on what we see in the US. I think in the United States, what you see as the FARA, Foreign Agents Registration Act, that's designed to capture, that's designed to cast a wide net and to capture all sorts of people that may or may not be directly paid by the government, but are certainly taking orders from foreign governments, including foreign state-owned enterprises and media outlets. And I think the British scheme first is designed to copy that. So I do think that whether in the UK or the US, we're about to see a lot more cases that are similar to this Yang Tenbo case crop up, simply because I think the Chinese have already engaged in quite a wide net of influence building in these places.
President Lai, we know that from the Mao era, he actually named 3 magic weapons. They were the CCP itself, the party itself, the PLA, i.e. the military, and also the United Front Work Department. How powerful is this state entity, and how does it compare to the Ministry of State Security?
United Front Work Department basically is work on the influence and try to be friends with you. And they would just probably call it that. This is, I came from the United Front Work Department, and basically my job is to be friends with you. We can build a positive win-win relationship, and everyone will benefit from this. And the Ministry of State Security is more or less work as intelligence. But of course, in China, the intelligence organization, there are several of them. PLA has its own intelligence operations. The Ministry of State Security is more like, in a sense of the CIA of the United States, or like NSB in Taiwan. It's more traditional security intelligence operators. When they are on a mission, they have a very specific object and the target they have to end. And when the mission finished, and they'll just retract and go to find another things. But the United Front Work Department, their work, basically to be friend, and it's going to be long term. They want to be part of something, and also from that they were able to influence in private, or there will be some of them could be a big voice influencers, but they are definitely connected with the Chinese state. And I think that is the issue when we talk about the interference operation, influencers, what they cultivated, and to change the whole result of political or economic environment. That is the area that we really need to pay attention to.
Okay. Now, the response of British Prime Minister Keir Starmer about this case was to emphasise the importance of maintaining engagement with China. Take a look.
Well, in relation to any discussions with Buckingham Palace, there's a long-standing convention in the United Kingdom that's never spoken about. But of course, we are concerned about the challenge that China poses. Our approach, as you know, I had a meeting with the President just a few weeks ago now. Our approach is one of engagement, of cooperating where we need to cooperate, particularly, for example, on issues like climate change.
Vincent, let me come to you. So, as he mentioned, Keir Starmer met Xi Jinping on the sidelines of G20 summit in Brazil. He said at that meeting he wanted relations with China to be consistent, durable, respectful, and, as they agreed, to avoid surprises where possible. What do you make of his response that we heard there in the soundbite in terms of how he's handling this surprise?
Newly incoming leaders do have that optimism to say that we do want to have a good relationship with China, because it's undeniable China is important. China is an important political player, it's an important economic trade player. Certainly for the UK, it's an important business partner as well. And so I do think for Keir Starmer coming in as a new prime minister after Labour has been outside government for over a decade, that there is a lot of, I think, willingness to try new things, particularly with China. We saw this, for example, in the United States when Obama went in and tried to build this new era of engagement with China, only for that to change into that pivot we saw later in his second term, all the way for President Trump to go in and engage in. That sort of devolved into where we saw the state of the U.S.-China relationship to be in 2020, and 2020, 2021. And so I do have to say that I do think that the British government, Keir Starmer, they're going to try. They're going to try to build a constructive relationship on China, because there are a lot of mutual interests at play, including, for example, his mentioning of climate change. But I do think that they're going to run into this cold, hard reality that China actually, in fact, doesn't want to play, and that China is intent on making progress on their own set of interests and priorities, which are inclusive of, for example, dominating Pacific, inclusive of, for example, the annexation of Taiwan, inclusive of disrupting this world-based, this global-based order that we've seen. So I do think that we're going to see the dynamics of the relationship change as the months and years go by.
President Lai, I mean, the emergence of this case at a time when the UK does appear to be, and the Prime Minister does appear to be quite gung-ho with this, warming ties with Beijing. Chancellor of the Exchequer will be visiting Beijing as well in January. The British opposition are questioning the extent to which the UK government should follow this approach. Do you think that it could, in the end, sort of derail the efforts by the Prime Minister?
I seriously doubt it, because this Labour government came in. They are in position, they wanted to show something different from the previous Conservative government. And the previous Conservative government, they were very hawkish on China. They take China, especially from Lisa Truss and all the way to the last Prime Minister, started to take a much harder position on China and see China as a challenge, even as a threat. But the Labour government, they decided that they wanted to change course, so that the Starmer, his statement, I think, is very consistent with that line. He wanted to continue that line. And so that when the cases came out, the first thing he said is not about we need to be cautious about how Chinese interference operation here in United Kingdom and how we should be prepared for the possible other spillover effect that would endanger our policy makings. But he is saying that our engagement policy will not be changed. So he wanted to protect that engagement line rather than see that as the opportunity that we need to rethink about our position in China. Yeah. And also the recent UK the policy. Some of the news about the policy statement coming from the United Kingdom, especially they have a 6 months of the so-called China audit, also seems to indicate that this position will be softer than the previous Conservative government. So I think that the Prime Minister Starmer, his statement and his response in these cases, probably as well as other development, is that he would not change.
Yeah, and so from the UK's approach of the 3 Cs, compete, challenge and cooperate, it seems that what you're saying is he's focusing on the cooperate. Final question. Following a series of arrests across the globe of people accused of spying or hacking for China, including 3 connected to China's ambassador to the UK, accused of assisting Hong Kong's intelligence services, the head of the UK's GCHQ intelligence agency described it all as an quote, epoch-defining challenge. The BBC previously produced a special report titled Shadow War, China and the West, highlighting that Western spies are said to focus on intelligence gathering to better understand adversaries, while Chinese operatives appear intent on Chinese regime stability. The report estimates that China employs around 600,000 personnel in intelligence and security operations, more than any other country. MI5 has revealed that in the UK alone, over 20,000 individuals have been targeted by Chinese spies through LinkedIn. Here's the UK Security Minister again.
As the Director General of MI5 made clear in October, we are in the most complex threat environment he has ever seen. Alongside the threat from terrorism, we face ongoing efforts by a number of states, including China, Russia, and Iran, to harm the UK's security. Our response is amongst the most robust and sophisticated anywhere in the world.
Vincent, so in the BBC report, British officials worry that the UK hasn't taken, the challenge from China in terms of its espionage seriously enough, and that it's falling behind. What do you think are the reasons for that?
Well, I don't think that's a challenge that's unique to the United Kingdom. I think the international community as a whole, including Taiwan, hasn't taken China's threats and challenges seriously enough. And certainly I don't think that we've had enough of a sufficient response to deter such actions from taking place. And I do have to say this, we talked about this number, hundreds of thousands of Chinese operatives. I do think we have to break past this mode of how we previously seen intelligence work, again, as specific purpose-driven intelligence work, but rather to cast this wide net of what Chinese sees as influence building. And this includes everything from what we've been saying in terms of political work all the way to the business work. I mean, look at this. In the United States.
So what are the goals, if we can just
Sure.
define the goals of that influence building to specifics?
That's my exact point, which is it's actually very hard to pinpoint those goals because there's a myriad of different motivations and goals at play. They're everything from, for example, commercial espionage, ensuring that Chinese state-owned enterprises receive the technology and capabilities they need, to the military espionage part, which is active efforts to either disrupt or gather critical information from like-minded democracies. But there's also the influence building charge, which is, for example, what we see across the United States when these consulates, Chinese consulates, are able to mobilize these Chinese Americans in support of specific purposes. So, for example, when President Tsai Ing-wen hand transited through Houston, for example, they were able to gather hundreds of people from all walks of life, but all connected to Chinese affiliated organizations to come out to Ratel to protest. But I mean, it's far more than that. For example, in Canada, there have been high-profile cases of actors connected to the Chinese government actively fundraising for specific political entities. I mean, all of these are cumulative, but they're also quite diverse in terms of their motivations. And I'll give an example. So CSIS has, an American think tank, has actually done a deep dive into what we see as Chinese espionage or Chinese influence building in the United States. And let me give you an example. So only 50%, less than 50% directly involved Chinese military government employees. 41% of these actors were private Chinese citizens. 10% were non-Chinese actors. 46% involved cyber espionage. But however, 29% involved efforts to acquire military technology, 54% involved efforts to acquire commercial technology, 17% sought to acquire information on U.S. civilian agencies or politicians, which is perhaps the case we see in the UK today. So again, there's such a diverse set of motivations and objectives here that it's very, very hard to pinpoint. But what is undeniable is that countries around the world, including Taiwan, must wake up to that threat. And we must realize that the threat vector emanates not just from the intelligence apparatus, but from the United Work Department, from other efforts that range across societal actors, from religious groups to local politicians to so forth. And we must have a response plan ready to confront these actions.
Related to that, President Lai, so going back to that BBC report, and they try to draw a contrast between Western espionage and the Chinese espionage. They say that, as I had quoted, that the Western espionage is about better understanding your enemy. And so that they say that the risk of falling behind is potentially catastrophic miscalculation. What do you think that this miscalculation might be and the stakes associated when we think of, you know, the things that are the red lines for China, which is Taiwan and increasingly the South China Sea?
Well, I would say that the miscalculation in this case usually comes in the form of that you mistaken those malign activity as these are benign exchanges. Some of the defense for the Chinese activity is actually true from that. That is, those people, they are just a business consultant to Prince Andrew. Probably they gave the very bad advices, but nonetheless, it's the open, transparent business consultant activity. So what? But the issue is that just as the show, it's called The Shadow War, is that they like to do in private. They never wanted to have those discussions open up in the public. And they never wanted to have those things even discussed in an open manner. So transparency is definitely something they try to avoid it. And that's how we call the shadow war and the influence operations. So usually when we are talking about, even for, I have experience like as a DP representative in the United States, I have to register under FARA, and I have to report all the activity I visit to the Congress and others, so that they know that whenever I visit the U.S., the elected officials, my interaction with them, I let the federal government knows, and also they also need to let the federal government know as well. But for Chinese cases, they will try to conceal in everything they can, not to let the public know what's happening there. And they try to brand it, this is the ordinary consultant work, but actually it's not. So I think the most important issue is that when you try to differentiate the Malaya operation from usually the ordinary consultant work, for example, just look at how much transparency they would like to give. That will be one of the important key.
Okay, we're going to have to end it there. We've run out of time. I'd like to thank Lai I-chung and Vincent Chao for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.
2025 is calling. Louder, brighter, and bolder. From the roar of the crowds to the bright moments of triumph. A year to experience sports at its finest. Grab your tickets, tune in, and cheer like never before. Every play counts. Every minute matters. Game on, Taiwan.
Taiwan Plus original series, Making Waves Beyond Taiwan. The Pursuit of a Cinematic Dream, Tsai Ming-liang, New York Festival's TV and Film Awards, Bronze Award. A documentary where Tsai reflects on his cinematic process and the future of his career. Road to Legacy, 57th Golden Bell Awards, Best Sound Design. A series that introduces 10 indie artists and bands and their road to musical stardom. More Film Festival approved Taiwan Plus originals. Bringing Taiwan to the world. Only on Taiwan Plus.